One of the things which I have always found peculiar about the lore of Genshin Impact is the overabundance of divine trees throughout the game's world building. Genshin's very first endgame mode, the Spiral Abyss, is symbolized by a tree. The goddess Egeria, through her death, ultimately led to the creation of a tree called the Harvisptokhm in Vurukasha Oasis. Similarly, Makoto's remnants were planted by A as a seed which grew into the sacred Sakura on Mount Yogu. Now, I know this can sound silly at first, because trees aren't exactly a rare sight to behold. Wherever there is civilization, you will always find trees. Thus, it is unsurprising that divine trees became integral components of several cultures and religions from around the world, including Nordic, Greek, and Chinese mythologies, as well as Christianity, all of which Genshin's developers draw heavily from. However, this is plainly self-evident. What I am interested in is the consistency with which the most notable of these trees are made to represent similar themes and fulfill similar roles. For if you consider all the divine trees spread out over Teyvat, they are almost always associated with a god or some great heroic figure of legend. So, if all these trees seem to be rooted in myth, godhood, and sacrifice, then what exactly are they telling us about the true nature of Teyvat? I pondered this topic for ages, until the Archon quest Paralogism, where Albedo reveals to the traveler that his mother, the Khaenri'ahn Sinner Rhinedottir, devoured the heart of the ruler of life, Naberius, one of the four shades of the tyrannical usurper king. Or, perhaps, I should say she devoured her seed. See, although the biological properties of a heart and a seed are completely different in practice, once you look at them thematically in the context of Teyvat's many divine trees, you will come to realize one of the most incredible world-building implications, not just in Genshin, but potentially the greater Hoyoverse at large. So, I think it's wise to start off by addressing the elephant in the room. The alchemist, Rhinedottir, ate the shade of life, Naberius, or at least her heart, which is also likely her seed, as I will demonstrate to you later in this video. Even though this reveal at the end of Paralogism was certainly unexpected, it isn't surprising, all things considered, since the concept of consuming the flesh of demon gods for a variety of purposes, including nutrition and sustenance, is something that Hoyoverse has been setting up for a very long time. And I am not simply referring to some cringeworthy foreshadowing with Paimon being the traveler's emergency food. The inclusion of demon gods in a healthy diet is a practice which traces back thousands of years of Teyvat's history, with the most obvious example from Genshin's early days being that of the goddess Havria, who governed the civilization of Salterai, which was once located between the realms of Andrias and Morax. Havria was not warlike by nature and did not possess the power to fight other gods, so she tried her best to avoid getting involved with the Archon War, and Morax, for his part, elected to leave her be, given that she posed no threat. Akin to Morax, Havria's element would have to be Geo, due to her being the god of salt. Now, the term salt applies to a wide variety of chemical compounds formed through neutralization reactions, but the most common type by far is sodium chloride. That's the table salt we all use in cooking. Sodium chloride, in turn, forms the cubic crystalline mineral known as halite, which is categorically a monomineralic rock, provided that aggregation occurs. It's a no-brainer to assume that Havria provided her people with the salt they used in their food. Such salt contains traces of her elemental energy and essence, making it part of her very being, which means that her people were, to some capacity, consuming their own god. Havria's case is therefore quite similar to that of other demon gods like Bifrons, who offered his flesh as food for his worshippers in ancient Sumeru. As you can see, demon gods are in fact edible. The consumption of their flesh is sometimes even facilitated and encouraged by the gods themselves. The implication here is that one could literally drink Focalors, and her fresh water is likely rich in essential minerals. Most players will wonder wonder, why can't Raiden cook? But now I believe we have been inquiring about the wrong thing. The real question we should be asking is whether Raiden can be cooked. Can Beelzebul be butchered, seasoned, and prepared into a well-rounded, healthy meal? Think about this. How does A taste? Well, given that she is the Archon of Inazuma, she probably tastes not too different from the Japanese snacks from my friends at Tokyo Treat and Sakurako, who happen to be the sponsors of this video. Tokyo Treat and Sakurako are high-quality subscription-based snack boxes that aim to help everyone experience the best authentic, traditional, and exclusive Japanese snacks, sweets, and tea from anywhere in the world and delivered right to your doorstep. Every month, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako will send you a new themed box full to the brim with the snacks designed around Japan's seasons and celebrations. This month in June, Tokyo Treat's theme is Konbini, featuring the best time-limited snacks sold in Japan's convenience stores. Expect to find cool treats like these mini melon pan biscuits, these butter soy sauce potato sticks, which I can confirm taste really good, a Baumkuchen Earl Grey cake, a Ginshari rice ball cracker, and of course Tokyo Treat's signature seasonal Kit Kats, with June's flavor being matcha chocolate. This is all without mentioning the many other konbini snacks inside, such as udon noodles, wasabi crisps, peanuts, and more, with all the necessary information regarding each snack and their potential allergies being listed in Tokyo Treat's monthly booklet, along with a bunch of fun facts about Japan's pop culture. Now, if you are more like me and prefer authentically prepared traditional sweets, pastries, and tea, then Sakurako has you covered. Each box is packed with artisan-made treats from local Japanese confectioners and snack makers. This June, the theme is Taste of Kyushu, Japan's southernmost island and an absolutely breathtaking landmass during the summer. I always like to start with the monthly tea that Sakurako sources from their partners at Takayanagi Seicha, a tea house in Shizuoka Prefecture that works with farmers across Japan to bring you some of the highest grade tea out there. This month's pick is the Chiran green tea from Furuichi Seicha, and boy does it come with a story. Furuichi Seicha was founded shortly following World War II in 1948 by a young Noboru Furuichi, when he started selling tea door-to-door across Kagoshima with nothing but his bicycle. More details from his story are found in Sakurako's June booklet, along with a host of other interesting facts about Kyushu's history and culture. You will also get a cool souvenir with every box in the form of home goods and tableware, which you can keep and use in the future. This time around, I got these cool Wakasa lacquer chopsticks from the artisans of Yamax in Fukui. And as you would expect, the snacks found in June's box are themed after Kyushu, where my personal favorites are these starch-based kozukiri, which is a type of cold noodles with honey, along with these soy sauce arare. Sakurako and Tokyo Treat are both fantastic options if you want to try out the best of Japan's flavors from the comfort of your home. And if you ever feel like skipping a month, then the option to pause or cancel is always available. So if you are interested, check them out through my links in the description and use code MYNAME4NOW on the screen right now for $5 off on your first Tokyo Treat or Sakurako boxes. With that said and done, how about we get back to snacking on some god lore? Given that Celestia's demon gods are actually edible, as I established earlier, it follows that eating a god's body can grant its consumer a varying amount of divine power depending on the type of tissue or organ. This effect is observed in a group of 3 scorpions on Yashiori Island who wandered near the skeletal remains of the coral serpent Orobashi. One of them must have fed on the serpent god's bones, leading to its ascension into a consecrated scorpion that manipulates electro energy. This transformation makes perfect sense as well, since electro is one of the elements that were controlled by Orobashi based on Yashiori's Tatarigami. I should clarify, however, that feeding on demon gods is not always a net positive for the consumer. Bifrons, for instance, offered his flesh to mortals during an era of war and famine, saving them from starvation while also knowing fully well that this practice would amass him a great number of worshippers, whom he then could effectively mind control for his own gain. This was all, of course, during an ancient time before Bifrons lost most of his power, back when he yet possessed a formidable and mighty form. I suspect Havria also benefited in some way from her people, however, her motivations were likely far less selfish than those of Bifrons, since she is described by Morax as having been a very kind and gentle soul. Regardless, what Rhinedottir ate was not just flesh or bone. She devoured Naberius's heart and was thus fused with the demon god. But before I delve into the importance of this act, it would be wise to go over the history of this deity and provide proper context for understanding who she was and her enormous impact on Teyvat. Pun intended. Oh, and also she will be crucial for the rest of this video, so you need to know her history anyway. When the first throne of heaven, the primordial one, descended upon the light realm, it soon made 4 shining shades of itself so that they may aid it in the affairs of war and creation. According to the Voyager, those 4 sisters later came to serve as shackles with which the usurper king imposed its absolute authority upon the mortal realm. As of version 5.6 and soon to be 5.7, most people are already familiar with the names of Istaroth and Renova, representing time and death respectively. The other 2 are Naberius, who governs the principle of life, and most likely the Sustainer, since the developers tag her model's skeleton as Asmodee, which is derived from Asmodeus, giving her an Ars Goetia name like the rest of Celestia's demon gods. Her domain should be that of space or void, depending on how you interpret the Chinese character Kong. As for Naberius, her purpose and position amongst the gods became apparent almost immediately following the establishment of Teyvat, as she was the one who went alongside the primordial one to fashion all living beings of the world, its plants, animals, and humans. Keep in mind, the implication here is that they also made Teyvat's prostates, bacteria, archaea, and fungi. The in-game text is just being poetic. And indeed, it is this unique role that Naberius played as the Primordial One's right hand in creation, which gives her a very slight edge over her 3 sisters, and the rest of Celestia's pantheon, at least in terms of characterization. But perhaps the most noteworthy act that Naberius is involved in is what she did in the birthing waters of the world, the primordial sea. After the heavenly principles took over the planet and established its new order, the ancient dragon civilization fell into decline as their sovereigns either retreated into hiding or simply died. One such deity who perished was the Dragon of Water, described as the beating heart of the primordial sea, which is itself referred to as the world's amniotic fluid. This term, from a biological perspective, refers to the liquid that surrounds a developing baby in the uterus, making the Dragon of Water, both symbolically and literally, the original god of life. Interestingly, Naberius, though she was made to be the next god of life, did not actually replace the Hydro Sovereign herself. Instead, Naberius created another goddess, Gentle Egeria, to serve as the primordial sea's second heart. For her part, Egeria is described as having been a heart with nobility unto a dragon despite lacking its outer form. This detail is critical because, unlike with humans, Naberius is said to have fashioned Egeria, both in substance and essence, entirely from materials native to Teyvat, without any outside influence. This leads me to strongly suspect that Egeria, who was created from matter unique to Teyvat to fulfill the Dragon of Water's role as the heart of the primordial sea, and who herself carried nobility akin to a dragon, was in fact fashioned by Naberius from the heart of the former Hydro Dragon himself after his death. This is, of course, just a personal theory of mine as of now, but it is a very well substantiated one if I would say so myself. For starters, it is implied that Egeria created her Oceanid familiars by dissolving the bones of a great lizard. And if Naberius truly did forge her from the heart of the Hydro Dragon Sovereign, then it would make perfect sense for Egeria to then create her own familiars from the remains of that same deity. Rhinedottir, a descendant of the Oceanids whom Egeria transformed into humanoid forms, points out how his and Jacob's bodies are of similar composition to that of the Gaukrena lotus, which houses Egeria's consciousness, further cementing that Egeria and her Oceanids originate from the same source. Additionally, according to Cassiodor and Scylla, a new dragon of water could not be born so long as Egeria slept in the primordial sea, while Neuvillette tells the traveler that he has no recollection of the era of Egeria, which is relevant given that he became the third and current heart of the primordial sea after she died in the realm of Farachkert. Regardless, there is more to this than meets the eye, because in reality, Egeria is not truly dead. Rather, she still lives on even to this day, albeit in a different state. And the details of what happened to Egeria 500 years ago during Khaenri'ah's cataclysm are paramount to understanding what's going on between Rhinedottir and Naberius. So, to do that, we're gonna have to look into the Vurukasha Oasis. The cataclysm of Khaenri'ah and the ensuing abyssal invasion that took place alongside it are primarily attributed to 6 despicable individuals, those being Vederfolnir, Hroptatir, Rerir, Surtalogi, Rhinedottir, and perhaps the most terrible of them all, the Vinster King, Ermin, who sought to control the abyss itself. Once the cataclysm struck Teyvat, the regions of Gareve, Lajavand, and Farachkert in the upper realms of what was once Amun's empire were some of the most severely affected by abyssal infestation, owing to their geographical position above the kingdom of Khaenri'ah. The then Hydro and Dendro Archons, Egeria and Rukkhadevata, rallied to that location to help quell the disaster. But the mistress of rivers and oceans fell in battle, her remains becoming the holy waters of Amrita. So, Rukkhadevata took Egeria's consciousness and anchored it in the mortal realm in the form of the Gaukrena lotus at the base of the Harvisptokhm, which is the god of the Pari. The Vurukasha Oasis and the Harvisptokhm located in it both originate from Zoroastrianism, and without going into too much detail, this Persian religion is relevant in Genshin because in his book, Flowers for Princess Fischl, Mr. 9 mentions the philosopher Zarathustra, who founded Zoroastrianism in ancient Iran and to whom the Honkai character Otto Apocalypse is metaphorically linked. There, the term Vurukasha means cosmic sea, and Harvisptokhm means a tree of all seeds. Within it grows the Gaukrena, which contains the seeds of all trees in the world and can grant eternal life to those who eat it. Now, when I say that Rukkhadevata used Egeria's consciousness to create the Gaukrena lotus, I am ironically being a bit misleading to stay true to the established lore, because what I believe will be revealed later down the line is that Rukkhadevata, in reality, made the Gaukrena from Egeria's heart. How can consciousness and the heart be tied? Well, this is where the seed analogy comes into play. In Volume 2 of the Byakuyakoku collection, Before Sun and Moon, there is an allegory known as the Parable of the Tree. In it, the king's gardener falls in love with the tree spirit of the royal garden. But the king, who was the primordial one, orders his gardener to cut down the spirit tree so its wood can be used to repair the damaged beams of his royal pavilion. Unable to disobey the command of the Almighty King, yet unwilling to cut down the tree in which his lover dwelt, the gardener pleaded his case with the Primordial One's priestess, who was Istaroth, and she took pity upon him. Istaroth instructed the gardener to cut the branches of the spirit tree, which he did before cutting down the entire tree as the Primordial One ordered him. Istaroth then told the gardener to plant all of the spirit tree's branches in the ground, and when he told her the tree would take 500 years to grow, she replied that his one thought of love shall echo through eternity. So he did as she said. Then, in an instant, the branches grew into a new tree, and the spirit in it was the continuation of the previous one. For it was Istaroth, the mother of every moment, who can take seeds from this moment into the past and the future. Needless to say, the parable of the tree is one that can be applied to various different characters and situations from Teyvat's history, and it is taken from Plate 6 of Shalamon Trismosen's illuminated alchemical manuscripts known as Splendor Solis, or Splendor of the Sun. This is probably a convenient coincidence, however I think the name of the legendary alchemist Shalamon Trismosen is worth noting since Salomon obviously comes from Solomon, while Teyvat's demon gods are named after the 72 Ars Goetia demons whom God subjugated to King Solomon, the son of David. What's funny though is that the illustration of Plate 6 is itself inspired by the Greek fable of Aeneas, a Trojan hero from the Aeneid, written by the Roman poet Publius Vergilius Maro. In Virgil's story, Aeneas journeys into the underworld accompanied by a priestess from the temple of Apollo to consult with his dead father, but by the entrance of the underworld grew a sacred dark tree, upon which is a golden bough, and as often as one of its branches is broken, another grows in its place. Aeneas had to break the golden bough and carry it with him in order to be allowed passage into the underworld. Alchemists interpret this story as a philosophical metaphor for spiritual transformation. The golden bough represents the wisdom or divine favor one must obtain to descend into darkness and emerge renewed. As such, the parable of the tree in Splendor Solis, through the golden bough that represents passage to philosophical enlightenment, is symbolic of Citrinitas, the third stage of the alchemical magnum opus with which gold is achieved. A detail that, as you can imagine, is crucial for the Khaenri'ahn alchemist Gold, Rhinedottir. But perhaps the most straightforward application of this parable in Genshin is what Baal and Beelzebul do at the end of the story quest Transient Dreams, where the traveler, with the help of Yaimiko, uses a torii gate at the heart of Mount Yogu to re-enter Makoto's domain of consciousness, where her sister A was fighting the Shogun puppet. Once Beelzebul unleashes the full power of Musu Ishin to emerge victorious, the last remnant of Baal's will, which she kept within the blade, manifests as an electro-energy sphere. This fragment of Baal's consciousness becomes a seed that Beelzebul then plants within Baal's domain of consciousness 500 years in the future, allowing the seed to take root atop Mount Yogu and, with the help of Istaroth, grow into the sacred Sakura tree 1000 years in the past during the cataclysm of Khaenri'ah. Now, it is incredibly easy to see how this whole interaction mirrors both Virgil's fable of Aeneas and the parable of the tree from alchemy. We've got the descent into the underworld by going into Baal's realm of consciousness, the struggle to overcome the self, which Beelzebul does with her puppet Shadow, and finally the attainment of enlightenment in the form of the seed of wisdom. In alchemical philosophy, that is gold. The authors of Splendor Solis likely based their rationale on this matter from the idea of Aeneas breaking the golden bough to reach his father and gain wisdom from him. It's quite clear that Beelzebul is the gardener in Genshin's variation of the parable of the tree. Not only because she is the one who plants the sacred sakura, but also you have to remember that Muso Ishin did not originally belong to A. Rather, it was handed down to her by Makoto. A's weapon, the grass cutter's light, was a weapon used to cut grass, whether that grass is armies or plants in her garden. There are a few other thematic connections between A and the figure of the gardener. For example, gardeners often deal with black soil, and due to a series of historical coincidences, black soil happens to symbolize the first stage of the alchemical magnum opus, Nigredo, which is embodied by the black-clothed apprentice in Splendor Solis, who is the gardener in Before Sun and Moon's parable. A was also Makoto's shadow, and shadows signify darkness, so the color black, which fits with the whole gardener archetype. As for Istaroth, she is the priestess of the primordial one in Parable of the Tree, the Oracle, the priestess of Apollo who accompanies Aeneas into the underworld to find his father. And in Splendor Solis, she is the philosopher clothed in white pointing at the tree. If you are wondering who the red philosopher is, he should be the primordial one because Solar King and whatnot. So I guess that would make him Apollo since Aeneas went to Apollo's priestess. You know what? I never thought about any potential primordial one Apollo parallels until right now. I'm gonna look into it later because Apollo is Artemis's brother, but yeah, anyway. The point of me going over all of those thematic parallels is to show you how what Baal Istaroth and Beelzebul did with the sacred Sakura tree narratively follows the overall philosophical endeavor of alchemy. Like I mentioned earlier, Before Sun and Moon's Parable of the Tree is applicable to several characters in Genshin, and aside from Beelzebul, another character who fits the role of the gardener is Albedo. Albedo is a gardener as well. He is even likened to one during paralogism. Speaking of paralogism, to transmute Anya's Durin into a homunculus, Albedo required the heart of Rhinedottir's Durin. However, the entire organ was massive. Thus, all Albedo really needed to do was extract the heart's core. Okay, now pause. I want you guys to take a good look at the core of Durin's heart, ignoring the golden energy Albedo uses to hold it. It is borderline identical to the sphere that houses the fragment of Makoto's consciousness in Musu Ishin, a divine sword that A keeps in the Shogun's heart. That's where she pulls it from every time. She's not pulling the sword from her breasts, she's pulling it from her heart. Durin's core was extracted from his heart, while Baal's core became a seed that, when planted, grew into Narukami's leyline tree, the sacred Sakura. And this brings us full circle to what I have been alluding to with Egeria, Rukkhadevata, and Naberius. You see, it appears to be the case that when it comes to deities like ancient dragons and demon gods, their hearts serve as containers for their core, which retain vital details like their essence, life force, and will. These cores, in turn, can function as seeds with which the deity in question is resurrected or lives on through a different form. Therefore, when it is stated that Rukkhadevata anchored Egeria's consciousness to the mortal realm, she might have planted Egeria's core, her seed, into the Vurukasha oasis so that the Queen of all waters may continue to subdue the abyss in the form of the Gaukrena lotus and the Harvisptokhm. What's fascinating is that this process is nowhere near being unique to Makoto and Egeria. There are countless examples of it with other characters in Teyvat. Vanessa, for instance, upon the moment of her ascension to Celestia, presumably cast her mortal body behind, and from that location a great tree grew in Windrise. The Aranara are all born from a tree of dreams created by Rukkhadevata, and upon their death, they themselves become seeds of Vasara trees. Just like what happened with Arama at the end of Aranyaka, where he became this tree right here in the land of grounded dreams underneath Old Vanarana. Then there is the demon god Boon, also known as Tao Do, who is an actual tree that guards the border between life and death in Liyue. But the best example I can think of is the avatar of the leyline tree Irminsul, Buer, who tells Paimon that if all of her power is exhausted, then she can be planted somewhere in Sumeru where she would become a blade of grass before eventually growing into a spirit tree. Very adorable. You could also make an argument for Bifrons because even though he did not become a tree, his offshoot, Shamaran, his daughter I suppose, is the tree-like mushroom that you can find in the chasm. Obviously fungi are not plants, but by that logic neither is the Harvisptokhm since half the structure is made from Egeria's Amrita water. So I think we should pay more attention to the functions of these trees rather than harping on their biological compositions. Egeria taking the form of a flower suits her really well since it is a nod to her creator, Naberius, who is herself symbolized by the Flower of Life artifact piece. Additionally, assuming my interpretation of Fontaine's lore is accurate, Naberius creating Egeria out of the first Hydro Dragon Sovereign's heart strongly mirrors Albedo's alchemical creation of a homunculus using the heart of Rhinedottir's fell dragon. After all, alchemy on Teyvat started out as a technique handed down to mortals by the first angel to mimic the primordial one's ability of creation. But before then, the only one who shared this authority with the king was the Shade of Life. The main takeaway from all of this is that in Teyvat, hearts can act as vessels for essence cores like those of Durin and Makoto. These cores preserve the nature of their original bearers like seeds, allowing them to either sprout into a new life that carries on their legacy or potentially even be used to bring the original being back to life. Such seeds will often be planted by characters who fulfill the metaphorical role of a gardener as it is outlined in Before Sun and Moon's Parable of the Tree, where the gardener is guided by the Primordial One's priestess, Istaroth, on how to plant his lover's tree. That's the ancient Mondstadian saying, seeds of stories brought by the wind and cultivated by time. Stories brought on the wind will bloom into legends in due time. And we see this concept in its entirety through the Raiden twins, Baal and Beelzebul. However, Beelzebul, though she is important, is not the gardener I care about. I only used her example to illustrate the gardener archetype. The real gardener who matters is Rhinedottir, Gold herself. You see, Dainsleif, Rhinedottir, and the other four sinners are by far the most likely candidates for the identity of the six pygmies mentioned in The Pale Princess and the Six Pygmies. In that tale, Rhinedottir is portrayed as the shrunken pygmy, whom the Pale Princess and the Prince of Light find searching for his garden. Later, while the pygmies plotted to betray the Prince of Light, Rhinedottir says the following: "Brothers, you have been hiding in the shadows for too long. The darkness has clouded your judgment. It is a new life that we need in order to survive. I say we use the corpse of the prince as fertilizer, so my garden may flourish again." Ultimately, the six dogged pygmies go through with their plan, killing their lord in a treacherous plot and dividing his power amongst themselves. But in his final moments, the Prince of Light cursed the pygmies to live the rest of their lives as if they were being boiled in a cooking pot, unable to ever see sunlight again. Rhinedottir's mental deterioration, as recounted by both Albedo and Alice during paralogism, reflects the effects of this curse laid upon her as punishment for her sins. Luckily, the new life that Rhinedottir ever so vehemently pursued ended up presenting itself to her on a silver plate when she and Albedo found the heart of Naberius deep within the earth. It is currently unknown what led the ruler of life to this state, but logic dictates that she fell in battle while defending Teyvat from the abyss. Regardless, her core has been devoured by Rhinedottir, turning the two into one. Thus, the fallen ruler of life is granted new life in the Garden of Gold. From this perspective, Rhinedottir became both the gardener and the garden. Her body is the black soil upon which the seed of Naberius was planted to grow into a new tree of life. And the purpose of this quote-unquote tree is clearly to stabilize the abyssal energy which Rhinedottir accumulated during Khaenri'ah's cataclysm, thereby cleansing her from madness. The reason I can confidently make this assertion is that this is precisely what the Harvisptokhm accomplished in Vurukasha Oasis, where the Gaukrena Lotus utilized the life energy extracted from Kvarena and Amrita to neutralize the abyssal energy from the sign of Apausha, locking the abyss in a stalemate until the sign itself was eradicated. Albedo corroborates this sentiment when he explains how the power of life and abyssal corrosion interact with one another in a manner akin to an annihilation reaction, which is the principle he applied while transmuting Durin into a homunculus by pairing his poisonous heart with the flesh of an immortal monster from the Merjivari to create a stable environment. All in all, the hearts of gods can become seeds through which their life is planted anew. Great, but is this the case only for gods? I suppose not. The world of Amphorius over in Star Rail is extremely similar to Teyvat, to the point where the narrative of both worlds is almost perfectly analogous. Therefore, we can utilize what we know about either Amphorius or Teyvat, while applying common sense and reason, to ascertain thematic and conceptual parallels in the other. One of the biggest plot points on Amphorius is the fact that its history, much like Teyvat's, is cyclical in nature, where the demigods of each cycle become the titans who govern the world in the next cycle. This discovery was fully formulated during the Trailblaze mission Scholar, Let Us Meet Again Before the Gates of Truth, by the alchemist Anaxagoras, one of the Grove of Epiphany's 7 sages, who are the direct equivalents of Sumeru's academia and its sages on Teyvat. Except, Anaxagoras is playable, so he actually looks cool. Anaxagoras looked into the origin of life as part of his endeavor to break the fate of Amphorius, as well as to repay his debt to the Risen Titan Xerxes for saving his life. By the way, Xerxes is the counterpart to the god of wisdom, Buer. I wasn't joking when I said the similarities are very blatant. Once he got all the answers to his theory of Nusporism, Anaxagoras reveals to everyone that the souls of Amphorius' denizens function as tiny invisible seeds that hold records of each person's memories of the world, and they are the buds that sprout from these seeds to grow into great trees. I am quoting him verbatim here because Anaxagoras straight up summarizes everything I have been explaining to you guys throughout this video, except that his metaphorical analogy applies literally in the continent of Teyvat, to the gods at least. Anaxagoras then states that mortals are extensions of the world, born from its essence. As people live, they plant pieces of themselves, their seeds, into the memories of others, and those seeds get scattered across the hearts of countless people, carried forward into the future. The biggest issue that he discovered after finalizing his theory is the fact that mortals and titans alike lose their memories during the genesis of each cycle. Such findings fall in line with the research of Fontane's Narcissus Ordo, whose studies into Khaenri'ahn alchemy led them to believe that mortal souls are refined over multiple cycles of history. Now, while Anaxagoras' conclusions are far more precise and honestly more accurate than those of Jacob and René, what truly matters is the striking correlation between the two worlds. Since when people die in Teyvat, their spirits and memories are absorbed by the ley lines into the realm of death to be reborn again, something we witness both in Natlan and Tsurumi Island, two areas closely associated with the Shade of Death, Renova. Nonetheless, on Amphorius, even though each person may remember another differently due to perspective variance, the core of who each individual is remains the same. That essence never changes, and so long as the world exists, it can't truly be destroyed, just misremembered. Yet there is one person who carries perfect memory, one who will always remember the world as it truly is, unfragmented and whole. That entity, according to Anaxagoras, is the world-bearing titan, the Sky Father Kefali. And it's to him that the world entrusts its legacy, its memories, its burdens, its future. Thus, Anaxagoras proclaims to the citizens of Akhima that humanity's greatest hero, Phaenon of Ides Elesei, shall become the god of deliverance and recreate everyone in the new world with all of their memories intact. We will probably get a good idea of what Phaenon will end up doing in the upcoming Star-Rail versions after 3.4, along with how Anaxagoras' plan will fit into the totality of Amphorius' narrative. But regardless of what Phaenon does, it's quite clear that there are those on Teyvat who bear a burden not too different from his. For in the Sea of Flowers, at the very end of the world, the Twilight Sword and the Fourth Descender will fight, and he who emerges victorious shall become the gardener who tends to the seeds of all life, and carry their legends into the opening chapter of a new tale. Fun fact, this video started out as being about, I kid you not, Escoffier and Changling, until it changed enough and became what you just finished watching right now. In reality, it was going to be primarily about Remus and Guoba, with Escoffier and Changling as honorary guests, but after thinking about it for a bit, I had a bunch of cool ideas about Anaxagoras and Rhinedottir, so I decided to shelf the other two for later and reallocate the topics accordingly. As you can see, these videos take a lot of time to produce, but I like the final product nonetheless. What I also like are the snacks from Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. They are very good. Check them out in the description if you want to try out exclusive and authentic Japanese snacks, and feel free to use code MyNameForNow at checkout to support the channel while you are at it. As always, huge thanks to all of my Patreon members, and thank you for watching till the end. For now, I've been My Name For Now, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.